Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for November 13th, 2017. We'll begin with the special order calendar decision items. Item number 1, 549 67BZ 7-9 Elm Tree Lane, the Bronx.
They requested to defer this decision.
Continued hearing items. Item number 2, 1255 80BZ 3533 31st Street, Queens.
They just submitted a request to withdraw this application, which I think is the best way to go on that.
Okay. Item number 3, 16998BZ 3141 Bailey Avenue, the Bronx.
Okay. Nothing was submitted on this since August. The owner was asked to attend the hearing. And at the last hearing, we adjourned and stated that the adjournment, this is the last hearing, that the adjournment request for 2 months to complete upgrades on the site. It's been in hearing for a year, so that this particular hearing was the last hearing, that last adjournment that would be permitted.
Ooh, sorry, I didn't realize.
So,
Well, I did reach out to Mr. Stahl and had a discussion with him. So he said the fence was being installed as of Friday, and the landscaping wasn't done because of, I guess, whatever issues. But I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was the last adjournment. So, but he'll be here Tuesday with, promises me, the owner.
well,
I went on Thursday, and there still was nothing done.
They said Friday.
Right, but there were other issues that we had with it in
Right.
terms of
Cleaning up and-
the need to clean up. There was a wreck on the premises,
Oh, great.
they don't do body work, so I don't even know what it's doing there. There were cars being worked on in the yard with the hoods up, and there was various debris along where the fence is. So, they haven't begun to do just about anything. Now, let's see if they have started the fence.
right, so it's been over a year now. And when we have an uncooperative owner, the board has a history of just denying the extension, and then that's the end of the business. So they need to understand that. They better come tomorrow.
Item number 4, 34403BZ 2777 Flatbush Avenue, Brooklyn.
They
Yes.
requested an adjournment, yeah.
Right, but they asked to put it on in the afternoon, in case anyone had any questions, maybe.
So is it an adjournment or
It's an
it's not an
adjournment.
adjournment?
It's an adjournment.
So either we discuss it in hearing or it's an adjournment.
It's an adjournment.
So they submitted no materials, so it's got to be
Yeah.
an adjournment.
Item number 5, 18708BZ 1247 38th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, apparently there was something else submitted, like this morning, a parking study or something before.
Traffic analysis.
Traffic analysis.
A comparison of the prior EAS to the proposed changes, and whether that would have any impact. I don't think anyone had a chance. to
No,
review.
we haven't looked at it. So the fire department sent a letter stating it's okay with the combined exiting situation with the dual uses of banquet facility and school. HPD also sent a letter saying that they, because they have control over that parking area, saying that they're okay with that parking area being used for bus parking for events held in the evening in the school. I'm not sure if they were told that it's for a commercial banquet facility, so we should check
But the
that.
zoning permits it.
Zoning permits it, but there was a restrictive declaration against this property in favor of HPD, and HPD had restricted the use of that
And I
lot.
believe it was specific to community facility.
Correct,
use.
correct. So I'm sure the way it was phrased wasn't quite as clear as the way it was requested, so we should reach out to HPD so that they understand it's actually a commercial use. Revised plans were submitted. No change to the subcellar or cellar were made. The mezzanine refrigerated trash storage room was relocated away from the fire stair. Otherwise, there were no, sorry?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, Otherwise, there are no changes to any of the other floor plans, including the 5th floor. So no responses at all to our comments. The applicant provided a parking plan for 37th Street side, showing 15 parking spaces and drive-up for 5 buses. They also show a valet parking diagram for 38 cars, but not spaces depicted. I'm not a driver, but I didn't really understand how the cars get from the curb cuts into those spaces without driving all over the sidewalk. With respect to the 38 cars, no parking calculations for the correct use of the cellar are provided. In fact, the zoning calculation page, which is on the plot plan, drawing number 1, shows 0 parking is required. Based on technical policy and procedure notice 16 of 69, the proposed use is actually a banquet hall in parking category D, not a catering facility in parking category B1. So the parking requirements are much greater than 38 spaces. My math is 121 spaces. You found that too?
No, I find that believable.
Believable.
You know, because a catering establishment is mostly a back office operation,
Right.
whereas this is people coming to the site to sit and eat and celebrate, so, yeah.
Right, yeah, on another application, I was very confused about how they came to the conclusion that they only needed something like 30 spaces when they have 600 people coming to a party, so I didn't, and what I realized is that they're miscategorizing the use. There are still two lobbies, each with ADA elevators and stairwells at the first floor, which access only the banquet hall at the cellar and mezzanine, and not the lunchroom in the subcellar. And these take up area that could have been devoted to preschool classrooms, 6 of which for the 3 to 4-year-olds are now on the second floor, mixed with elementary school children, or the space could have been used for administrative offices, which they explained to us they have a need, and the offices could kind of be anywhere. The floor has the first floor has an enormous lobby that could easily accommodate the after-school nighttime activities. In fact, it's a very huge, elegant scale lobby. The programmatic needs update states that those two extra lobbies are exit discharge areas. But if that were actually the case, why do they have separate ADA elevators to access the banquet hall, coat check areas, and toilet rooms? The 2 stairs at the 38th Street side exit efficiently directly into stairs to the exterior. So that would be, if you weren't designing for a banquet hall, that's what you would have on the 37th Street side. Applicant hasn't once shown us a floor plan that eliminates the 2 lobbies and uses the main lobby as the entrance to the banquet facility, or shown us a 5th floor plan to accommodate the offices. One, where it complies with the setback that was granted, setback requirements that were part of the prior approval. One ADA elevator continues up from the men's catering lobby from the 37th Street parking lot to the classroom floors, but the only way to get to it is through the side lobby, which is not the principal school lobby, hence is not along the same path of travel as is available to the other students, which is contrary to the basic thinking about how ADA accessibility works, where you're not distinguishing people from each other. Everyone enters at the same place, and then one person takes the elevator, that's all. Access, also, if you're going through the main lobby and you want to take that ADA elevator, you need to go through 2 sets of enclosed fire stairs, so clearly the ADA elevator is not for the students. The ADA elevator off the 38th Street entrance at least is directly off of the main lobby. However, the door to it should open into the lobby instead of requiring a wheelchair user to go through 2 sets of doors down a corridor. I actually really don't understand.
It can easily
that.
be flipped,
Yeah,
where the
or you-
entrance can be just off the lobby rather than going through those 2.
Right, you don't even need to
multiple-
flip it, you just add a door. It's very
That's true,
common to
yeah.
have 2 doors on, 2 sets of doors on an
Yeah.
elevator. And also, I'd like to know how the school intends to prevent strangers who are working or working in the banquet hall or attending an event there from entering at the school levels when one elevator and both stairs continue from the hall to the upper levels. And from the 5th floor continues to show offices along the perimeter that penetrate the setback area. These offices could also have been located on the 1st floor, as I say, where the extra lobbies are, and the students could utilize the enormous 975-person capacity catering hall as their lunchroom, or lay out the 5th floor more efficiently to allow for the lunchroom opposite the administrative offices. When I eliminated the setback and laid out the floor slightly differently, I find room for a much larger and better lunchroom and 2 nice-sized offices. So this is just unwillingness to do it as opposed to inability. With respect to the programmatic requirements update, it states that the school will have only 115,000 square feet, equal to a substandard 77 square feet per student, but ignores the full cellar, subcellar, and mezzanine, which are almost entirely open spaces and available for use by children, as opposed to eliminating cellars, which they did in their study, which are usually devoted entirely to mechanical spaces. So you can't compare. You have a 12,000 square foot open space and say that that doesn't count.
Well, one should argue that that space should be divided by the students and added to the original number that they say is substandard, and that they don't use it for the students is on them.
Right.
But it should be figured as being for the students' use, and then that, of course, brings up the average square foot
Well,
per
they are.
student, and so, no, it's not including the
It's
banquet
not,
space.
they're not including it when they come to the 77 square foot per person, per child
didn't-
analysis, they're excluding the cellar because that's what they did with all the other schools they were comparing it to.
Right, no, I agree with you. I think,
Yeah.
but they're utilizing the space, so therefore, programmatic chart-wise, they're saying they're using it, but they have not included in their analysis.
Right, and so they can't make the argument that they have substandard number,
I agree
amount
with you.
of space per student.
Right.
Right.
I agree with you.
Right, okay. And then the argument that we consider Minna Street application separately from 38th Street, I think that's inconsistent with the reality that the approved application for this site was a pre-K to 12th grade school, and that the programmatic needs statement itself concludes that there isn't room and now desire to include the high school students in the same building as the middle school and lower school students. So clearly, there's a linkage pedagogically. Whether they're run by separate administrations is kind of irrelevant. Of course, you can't have the same administration run a school that's X blocks away from another school. That's not practical, but that doesn't mean that it's not all coming from the same programmatic analysis. Okay, and I think those are my comments. Others?
I just wanted to follow up on, as you were saying, is that while some of the analysis that were submitted regarding how the cellar spaces and the lunchroom spaces and the multipurpose rooms were being used by students, they were not incorporated into the analysis, and which kind of skews the number to make their argument how this is underbuilt and therefore that additional 5th floor is needed. I also, as I was looking at the hours that they have shown, it almost seems like every day there's going to be gym at the same period of time, which is not the case. I mean, based on the requirements, some grades need to attend gyms every day, some every 2 days. There will be enough time gaps in between that would allow for that space to be used for other purposes. So it goes back to the argument of that additional space that's being proposed on the 5th floor. Can that not be programmed in a way where there is no conflict between the lower grades and the 9th grade? I think there is enough gaps in between those during the weekdays that allows for it. I don't think the chart has been clearly laid out that shows that gap. And the 9th grade has to be incorporated. And they're also going to use the gym, and they're not using the 9th floor, the 5th floor gym, so I'm assuming they're going to use the cellar. So there has to be some, interchange of activities. So the document needs to be much clearly laid out. again, making the argument from the initial statement, initial proposal that we had before us, which was a grade all the way to 12th grade, and now it's only up to 9th grade. The question is, what happens to the 10th, 11th, 12th? I mean, this program has gone through so many switches. We don't, I think I would want to know where the high school is going to be located, so that it doesn't become like, well, we need the high school space, and then we need to add a few more floors here.
Right. Well,
This creep cannot keep happening. We need to clearly know the programmatic need. Maybe at the time in 2010, whatever the school concepts were was different, and this was not factored in. But so we fully need to understand where the trend is going and how this fits into the future trend, and it will not create another need down the road if this is what they're proposing.
Well, they're obviously looking to administrate, which we've discussed in other hearings, and it's too small of a site to accommodate.
Right. But they're saying
The
it's
scale
not,
of
so,
children,
and that's
right.
why my question is, where
Yeah.
is then the high school going? If
Right.
Middle Street is not the one, where is it going then?
Yeah, right. Okay, fair. And also, the description about, I found it quite interesting, this description about the 9th grade, but it's,
And
It's
Middle Street
confu-
also has 9th grade.
yes, but if you
So-
look at that chart, it says they go from pre-K to this thing they call the 9th grade, and that's still in the elementary, middle school. And then they have this other thing that's the high school that starts in the 9th grade, and that's for older kids. So some of it is a labeling problem, but then the other part of it is that somehow they have this program where kids who have not been coming to this school are allowed, I find that very odd, having gone to a private school where you would never be allowed to enter the school in the last year, because the culture of the school is completely different from the school where you came from, and the idea that they would be dealing with kids who haven't been raised, trained in the way this school's pedagogy works, I actually find that quite hard to believe. But they say that they will bring in 3 more classes, so it's 90 more kids who have not had any background in the school for a year of training here, so that then they can go to the high school. But that's now 7 classes of 9th graders. Minna doesn't have 7 classes of 9th graders, nor does it have 7 classes of anything else. So that doesn't actually, so then they go to this 9th grade program only for a year, and then they don't go to the high school? That's the other disconnect. So,
So this is like a preparatory school for other high schools?
no, that's not what they
And
said.
that's why, though, they need to have both of these cases to be
Together.
heard at the
Yeah.
same time, because otherwise you could be accepting certain arguments for this case that really don't follow through when you look at the other case, and that's
Right.
a major problem.
Right.
I had comments about the 5th floor. I'm still not convinced that they need to build straight up without setting back. It says that they were going to have 210 13-year-olds, and they have a study hall that holds 244 people.
Right.
And then they talk about how it's concurrently used with the classroom. So if it's concurrently used with the classroom, do you need then to have 244 people accommodated in that study hall, or could it be a little smaller? And also, you have 2,100 square feet of administrative office space, which includes a president and a vice president, and I'm not entirely sure what the president and the vice president do regarding this 13th floor program and whether they need to be located there, because you also have a principal and a vice and an assistant principal also located on that floor. And so I think that perhaps the administrative offices for the president and vice president could actually be located elsewhere. That's sitting in the setback, in what would be the setback, and then the study hall could also be made smaller.
Well, and
And
then
you
the
probably
lunchroom
could fit
bigger.
everything where it needs to be and set back.
Right. And I actually, in terms of fire egress, because it was at our insistence that they added another egress route, right? So what I'm not sure is that you actually need the corridor to wrap around, and because you have 2 means of egress, one on each corner. And so the distance, the run distance is less than the 150 feet to each corner, right? And the quantity of students obviously is limited if you just kind of bisect the building into 2 parts. Then I believe you could slide the lunchroom up against the study hall, and then it could take up that entire space, and you're accessing them from the sides, right? And so it's actually wasteful to have that wraparound corridor, which doesn't seem to be necessary because there's ways to get into a large study hall and a large lunchroom, and then there's room for 2 offices on either side next to the staircases.
So you're thinking more of a horseshoe corridor?
Yeah, exactly,
that
a
goes
horseshoe.
through 3 sides.
Right, I'm not seeing the need to have the wraparound. You see it on the other classroom floors because that's natural for how schools work, but here, it's administrative offices and a lunchroom. It's a completely different kind of
Right, they can
program.
operate independently and that's it.
Right, so everybody is coming, and the students are coming down from their classes and going into the study hall, or they're going down into the lunchroom. And then the faculty offices can be on the 2 sides. So for me, this is clearly, they just don't want to, and that's not a finding. Anything else? No. I think a really big problem is without the spaces, the correct number of parking spaces for the catering facility, this is a total no-go because it's got to be legal, and this is not, I shouldn't be calling it catering, it's banquet hall. Okay,
Move on.
yeah.
New cases, item number 6, 19808BC, 270 Park Avenue, South Manhattan.
Okay, that's a new case, right. Okay. We do have proof of notice of hearing to officials, but I didn't find in the file proof of service of initial application to officials.
All right, I'll look for it.
Yeah, although Community Board 5 sent a letter indicating waiver of application review. The 3 tenants on the 3rd floor provided letters stating they do not find the PCE to be disturbing, noise or vibrations, and have never filed a complaint. We were provided with 2 massage therapist licenses, although one expired in February, so it just needs to be updated. I note that the C of O now shows the mezzanine, and that there is gym occupancy on it. That was a discussion in the resolution, that the C of O didn't show a mezzanine, so they corrected that. The acoustical details shown on the drawings show acoustic mats under the 3rd floor slab and metal sound deflection clouds hung from the 2nd floor ceiling. That's the first time we've seen that kind of approach to acoustical separation, which I thought was interesting. There's a note on the drawings also that the windows are non-operable and double glazed, but I didn't see an indication, and maybe it's a confusion about how it was written in the resolution, of a 1-inch thick rubber flooring at the exercise rooms on the 2nd and mezzanine floors, or that a distributed speaker system with moderated volume unit was installed. All of those were conditions for the last approval in 2009. What I can't tell on the drawings, the previously approved drawings also show that mat on the ceiling. They don't show it on the floor, and so I think it was perhaps a misrepresentation in the resolution for what they meant by that it was going to be on the ceiling of the floor. So it's the 2nd floor ceiling as opposed to the 3rd floor slab, under the slab. So, I'm not sure about that, but the drawings only show details for the 3rd floor slab. So I'd like the applicant to just talk about that if they happen to know. And they need to provide proof of fire department inspection of the sprinklers and the fire alarm. Anything else? Anybody else?
Okay, anybody? Good? Appeals calendar to continued hearing items. Item number 7, 10815A through 11015A. This is Glebe Avenue, the Bronx. They have withdrawn.
Yeah, or request to withdraw.
Request
Right.
withdrawn, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Item number 8, 2016-4253A, 565 St. John's Place, Brooklyn. They're requesting an adjournment. Item number 9, new cases, 2017-25A
Yeah, it's the
through
third.
2017.
Just as a reminder, this is the 3rd adjournment on St. John's, so, they start to get close to our maximum. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you. New case is item number 9, 2017-25A through 2017-28A. This is 3094 and 3098 Dare Place, and 3093 Castler Place, and 3095 Castler Place, the Bronx.
Okay, this is a really tricky one. Okay, this is an interpretive appeal pertaining to a waterfront zoning lot. So the threshold question for me is whether this is in fact a waterfront zoning lot. The definition states that such a lot is one, quote, having a boundary at grade coincident with or seaward of the shoreline. In this case, there is a significant drop-off from the bulkhead line to the shorehead line. The January, sorry, just 1 second. I enlarged, now I can't find it. The January 2nd, 2017 ZRD1 states that the two adjoining lots, each having a boundary at grade coincident with the shoreline, meets the definition of waterfront zoning lot pursuant to section 62-11. But I'm not sure whether the DOB was given a section through the site and whether it was aware of the grade change between the edge of the lot and the shoreline. So I'd like the DOB to opine on that more specifically, because if it's not a waterfront lot, it's a whole different conversation. Okay, so, and just to clarify, I think there was a mistaken reference in the statement of facts about the different tax lot numbers. I just want to clarify that the waterfront lot that was brought into the zoning lot is lot 491 and not 492. 492 is a lot underwater, so just make sure that the references are correct. And then the question is the line bisecting the waterfront block a rear lot line under section 1210? Assuming this is a waterfront zoning lot, 62-331 converts the rear lot line to a side lot line if the rear lot line intersects the shoreline. In that event, semi-detached buildings on either side of the side lot line are permitted in R31 under section 1210 definition of semi-detached buildings, and by section 22-12, provided they also comply with section 23-49. So this is like wending your way through all the definitions and all the sections. Section 23-49 allows a new building to abut an existing building or another new building along a side lot line, provided that walls of the building containing residences and walls of the existing building abut for a length equal to or greater than 1/2 of the distance between the street wall line and the rear wall line of the existing building. So I don't know, because I didn't do math on this, I don't have the dimensional information. Do the abutting portions meet those dimensional requirements? So that's another kind of basic threshold. Section 23-891 is clear that it applies to all zoning lots with 2 or more buildings containing residences. And I don't know how to get around the all zoning lots. This board has actually looked at other cases where the word all is used in the sentence. Sometimes it'll say something like all or substantially all, which modifies it, therefore lessening the quantity of all. But this is just simply all. So 23-891 is supposed to be addressing distance between 2 or more buildings on a zoning lot. So this section does not appear to contemplate a situation like this, where the 2 buildings on the zoning lot are side by side relative to the street as opposed to one behind the other. Arguably, given that the rear lot line has converted to a side lot line and the rear yard is actually the waterfront yard, the orientation should be with respect to the waterfront instead of the street, and 30 feet between the 2 buildings provided on the same zoning lot. The drawings, however, show only 20 feet to 24 feet between the buildings on each zoning lot, so wouldn't comply if that were the interpretation, but that's a very stretched interpretation. I'm not saying that's what it says. I'm just you know, given that it probably didn't contemplate the situation, maybe it would be reoriented, but in any event, the buildings don't comply if it were reoriented. So the biggest issue for me here is that the zoning resolution directs that the provision apply to all zoning lots with 2 or more residences. So here we are, one of the zoning lots to which this applies. Section 62-33 states that for all other developments, yards shall be provided in accordance with the provisions of section 62-331 and 62-332. So can we say that Article 6, Chapter 2 overrides Section 23-891, which is an open area regulation, not a rear yard regulation? So I don't actually believe you can, because open area regulations apply when there are no lot lines, to which yard regulations can apply, and that's done to guarantee that open space is provided on the lot.
Right, and isn't the rear, isn't it applying to 23-891 applying to the building and the orientation of the building and not the lot? And the
Right.
other one applies to the lot and has to do with lot lines and yards.
Yes,
Right.
right, yes, I agree. Yeah, in fact, 23-881 regulates the distance between lot lines and building walls for buildings in lower density growth management areas, but not in this case where the building is within 50 feet of a street, so that doesn't apply. The trouble in this case is really that the 2 original zoning lots were treated as very shallow through lots at only 50 feet deep for each house, and that any subdivision of the zoning lot to correct that treatment appears to run counter to general assumptions about the relationship between buildings on adjacent zoning lots or on the same zoning lot. However, there are other houses in this district, so that's what's odd about this. There are other houses in the district with similar relationship to what was built here, which may have been the reason for the architect's confusion, because everything sort of looks like this in the neighborhood, more or less. I mean, these are larger attached, or let's say they're actually attached. The other houses in the neighborhood have a little bit in the rear. You see like 8 feet between them or something between. Further, let's see if, I think I just have another couple of comments. Further, this back-to-back approach to a semi-detached is clearly atypical of the standard, which is a side-by-side semi-detached. And even if the zoning resolution isn't explicit in stating that the shared party walls run front to rear, it's not explicit, but it's obviously is the standard, that we always think of a side-by-side and not back-to-back. And 23-891A appears to be a way of enforcing that orientation. And B appears to remind that semi-detached structures impact standard side yard situations. So it's a roundabout way of the zoning resolution telling you which way to face your house, it seems to me, but it seems like that's what it's doing. I'm wondering, though, whether the problem could be cured by subdividing the 4 lots into separate zoning lots and providing a 5-foot side yard along the so-called side lot line, and a 10-foot rear yard along the rear lot line. I didn't, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do violence to the buildings, but it's not an enormous cutting back on the properties. And I'm wondering whether four zoning lots would solve that.
Make it 4.
Other comments, please?
Yeah, this was an interesting puzzle. It's like it's jumping from one regulation to the other
Yeah.
to understand which one overrides the other one. But as you have explained, I think the way this reads, and I was trying to figure out why the zoning lot was carved out the way it was. And I think it was more to kind of, because the depth of that block is less than 200 feet, so once you carve it out the way it has been done, this was to maximize the front yard. Otherwise, a front yard of 30 foot would have been required, and the setback, and none of that could have been achieved in an as-of-right manner. So I'll be curious to see how, if the lot is divided into 4 zoning lots, whether that would meet any of the regulatory requirements. I don't think so. but I think this is an exercise I also need to understand to kind of see where it could have been, from where it could have been in the most simplest, typical way to where it is now, and then kind of figure out the regulations accordingly.
Well, I mean, it seems to me if the rear building wall is that part of the building that is opposite the frontage, and the frontage is on those two streets, then the regulation that applies to the separation at the rear building wall
Would
would
still
not be
remain.
affected. It would still
Still
be
remain.
active or actively enforced, even in a 4 zoning lot.
Ah,
Because
exactly.
it's dealing with orientation of the building.
Right.
And the building orientation isn't going to change. The frontages of the building are still on those private streets.
Right, but then it's separate zoning lots, and that section 880, whatever the
I think it
number
may
is.
create other issues.
Certainly that,
Right.
yeah.
But
Eight-
it's not going to alleviate
The open area required at the
Yeah.
rear wall of the building, because the
Right.
rear wall will still stay the same, because the orientation is still towards those two private
That's
streets,
where
Castler and Dare.
That's where the
Right.
front yard definition and all of that,
Right.
you work your way up.
But the thing is, if it's a side lot line, which it would be if it's not a waterfront lot, right? So the two that are further back, those aren't side lot lines anymore. Those
Right,
are
but
rear
they're
lot
making
lines.
distinction about the building versus the lot line, which it was unclear in the appellant's papers, but to me, it became clearer in DOB's papers, that what they were doing is they're taking the idea of rear yard, rear lot line, and applying that to what's going on here, and saying therefore 23-891 doesn't apply, but 23-891 applies to the building and not to the lot.
Right.
And so therefore, building orientation is key here. And being that the building frontages are on Castler and Dare,
Yes,
the rear part of the building, it doesn't make a difference if it's fronting on a side yard or a rear yard. It's the rear of the building in relationship to the frontage, the
But
street address.
but 891 only applies when there are two buildings on a zoning lot.
So you do have
So-
two buildings on a zoning
No,
lot?
no,
okay.
no,
Oh,
I'm
you're
saying
saying
if
if
you
it
divide it
then
into
is
4.
Cutting across that side lot line, then
Yeah.
each one will be one
One
building
zoning
on
lot.
it.
And then the zoning lots will be shallow and entitled to, where there's a rear lot line entitled to a 10-foot rear yard. So it's a 10-foot cutback. I'm not saying you don't have to damage the buildings. And on the waterfront lot, if those are waterfront lots, then it has to comply with side yard requirements, which is, I believe, is 8 feet in this situation.
Because
That-
in that case, there's no rear yard, no
Right,
rear
because-
lot line.
Because it
'Cause it's
converts to a
waterfront.
side lot
Uh-huh.
line.
Okay.
Right, that's what I'm thinking, but I
Oh.
didn't test it against all of the many regulations that still apply. Or whether having created, I'm not even sure what the status of the zoning lot is right now, but once, they would need to get it approved to subdivide the zoning lot, right? So I think the zoning lot was subdivided left and right in the filings. So then they would need to be approved by DOB to further subdivide the zoning lot, and I don't know whether it meets all the
Because
requirements.
then it would be non-compliant, and so they wouldn't allow it.
Right, might it be non-compliant, because I didn't check what the lot area is of the
Well,
zoning
wouldn't
lot,
it be
et cetera.
non-compliant without cutting, if they don't first cut the buildings back?
Yeah, they would have to file to remove.
With plans to cut the buildings back.
Yes, and that would be part of the approval, yeah. Assuming that it works in all the other directions, and I don't know if it does, yeah. Okay.
Might be the only way to preserve
Yeah.
something.
Any other last, okay.
Go on.
Uh-huh.
Zoning calendar, decision items, item number 10, 2017-60BZ, 111 Barrow Street, Manhattan.
Okay, this one, we need to defer decision pending some further environmental studies for air quality and hazmat, and submission of a phase 2, that's the other. Okay.
Continued hearing items, item number 11, 9114BZ, 3420 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn, they requested an adjournment.
This is the
Right.
third adjournment in a
Yes.
row.
Okay, so it's more than a third adjournment in a row. We've been at this case for 3 years. Change of counsel notwithstanding, we've been at this case for 3 years, and we have not heard it for almost a year due to adjournments. So therefore, this is the last adjournment, and we must inform the owner in writing, owner and applicant in writing, that failure to respond fully to the board's 12/16/16 comments by the next hearing date will result in dismissal. Okay.
Item number 12, 11614BZ, 188 East 93rd Street, Manhattan.
Okay. As the board requested, neighbors within 200 feet of the premises and residents of the subject building were notified of this hearing. We received no letters of opposition and one in favor, but I think the one in favor is actually from the owner. It's a very particular last name, so I doubt it's a coincidence. There is a October 2nd, 17 DOB complaint, and a 10/20 or October 20th inspection for work without a permit. The applicant's representative should discuss this. A sound study in the corridor on the second floor was conducted since the last hearing. Apparently, the tenant in the apartment above the studio, which is 1L, would not allow access for testing. But I'm confused because I thought there was a tenant in the other apartment, 1J, on that floor who moved out because the noise was unbearable. So why couldn't they test in there? I understand that unit got carpeting, so that's an extra layer of acoustical separation. AKRF's noise report with respect to vibration levels stated that although objects wouldn't fall off the shelves, you could still hear a rattle or a buzz of them in place. So imagine it's 6 a.m. and it's the day you don't need to get up at 6 a.m. And there you are lying in bed, and the spins classes started, and everything on the shelves has this kind of tone, rattle, reverberation. How fun! So that's exactly the kind of annoyance that we are trying to prevent. So AKRF study actually seems to indicate that they have not done enough to isolate the noise, the vibration. And in addition to which, they did show in the corridor, which is of course different than in the studio directly above, that there was a 10 decibel difference between ambient and music. And so that's perceptible even if it's still below noise codes. And the whole idea is that these studios are not something where it's 6 in the morning or 7 at night when you're like calm at home. You're dealing with the fact that there's a spin class going on, which is one reason why spin studios are designed as these isolated boxes within boxes. And this one wasn't, even though they've made a lot of effort somehow to reduce the annoyance, which obviously was so bad that it chased a tenant away. So they have more work to do. The acoustical consultant needs to come to the hearing. And just as a reminder, Community Board 8 voted unanimously to deny this application, and that there were something like 100 complaints against this problem in the past. So we need to make sure that the applicant addresses it. Plus, they've delayed prosecuting this application for several years, probably because of this very problem. We also asked at the last hearing that they provide drawing details of the acoustical measures that were taken and indicate specifically on the plans where the measures were installed. We also asked and didn't receive for proof of sprinkler installation. It says that there's sprinkler installation, but none of the photos indicate sprinklers. You can usually see sprinklers on the ceiling somewhere, and it doesn't seem to show any sprinklers were installed. Anybody else?
So this is based on my site visit. I was actually I wasn't planning to go there, but I had to go there. I was in the neighborhood. So, and when in the lobby area, I would say when I walked into the lobby area of the building, the facility,
studio.
the studio itself, I couldn't hear the noise. But when I did go close to the door of the studio, you could hear the noise and the beat and the instruction.
from
the
outside
music
or?
from inside, and also from outside. So then when I walked around the building, and there is a door from the studio that leads to the street. And when you're right outside that door, you can hear the instruction, the music, and that thumping noise. So that sound was perceptible when you, and it was only in that area when I walked by that door. The rest of the wall, I could, and I walked by a couple of times just to kind of see, and that's where the location is. So there is definitely some issue, if I can hear it at the street level, and this was morning time, 9 o'clock or so, so you have enough traffic outside,
Right.
and I could still hear it.
And by way of comparison, I live across the street from a spin studio, and I actually used to take classes at the spin studio. You never hear anything because it's a floating, isolated room. And I know they went to enormous expense to isolate that, and there's a yoga studio above it. So a yoga studio can't handle even the slightest little rattling of whatever, right? So, sorry?
They're not levitating.
No, they're not levitating as far as I know. And even if they were, it would probably break their concentration. Okay.
You're funny.
Item number, may I move on? Item number 13, 224 14BZ, 225 14A, 1534 Victory Boulevard, Staten Island.
Okay. They submitted a revised plan. This one shows a 30-foot wide clear driveway to the two houses at the rear that is buffered by 4-foot-high shrubs that border the expanded parking lot for the medical offices. That has 13 angled spaces on the 12-foot wide drive, plus a 5-foot wide sidewalk, and plus 8 new 20 by 8'6" parallel spaces accessed by a 13-foot 2-inch wide drive and an undimensioned sidewalk. So actually, I'm not sure that there's a sidewalk there. Plus a new ambulance drop-off zone in front of the building that's accessed by a new second curb cut. Note that under section 25-66, the 4-foot high dense planting must be planted to reach 6 foot high within 3 years. And 25-624 requires similar screening of the parking lot from the street, which isn't shown at all, which needs to be done, assuming everything. So, and I also don't know whether, I think that the two houses don't comply with the frontage requirements, so would need a GCL waiver in order to be permitted. So while the layout, I thought, is a really big improvement over what we saw in the last submission, I'm still stuck at the D finding, which continues to argue that the hardship here is caused by the flag lot, even though the owner of the medical facility merged with it in 2011. The statement of fact states, I believe incorrectly, that 3 homes cannot be developed on the flag because the fire department won't allow it. The as-of-right drawing shows that access to the 3 homes is required by the zoning resolution to be a private road, and the road layout has to comply with certain requirements. And in addition, the layout doesn't comply with yard requirements, so it's the zoning resolution that wouldn't permit the 3 homes on the flag, not the fire department. In addition, the feasibility study argues that the difference between 2 houses and a medical facility with 16 parking spaces and 2 houses and a medical facility with 21 spaces makes the difference between profitability and loss. I just find this intuitively hard to believe in the first place, in spite of the cost analysis, because there are already 21 cars parked on the lot, and with valet parking could be better managed. We were never shown an as-of-right plan also with the entry and exit curb cut on the medical office site. So now that that second curb cut is actually on the flag, right? And we had talked a lot about clearing up the problems with the ambulance by having a drive up, and they never showed us that. In addition, why couldn't the two houses be increased slightly in size to generate more sales income? Two of the comps are 300 square foot larger than the proposed, so why couldn't the houses be 300 square feet larger or larger? It's underdeveloped in terms of floor area. The Stonefield study observed as many as 28 cars parked currently on the site. So clearly, if the site were expanded, more cars would crowd onto the site and perhaps exacerbate the problem. It seems to me that parking management really is the solution, and I'm still having trouble getting around the A and the D finding. So, and in part because they keep talking about the parking is the building, the medical building being functionally obsolete, and we talked about that at prior hearings. It's not, they're saying it's because it doesn't have meet contemporary parking requirements, but it's not required to, so it meets the zoning resolution's requirements for parking. So, next.
So,
Yeah.
I just wanted to talk briefly about the financials. One thing we asked them to do last time was to take the financials and focus in on the original Lot 80, which was the original flag-shaped lot, and show us whether or not there was a hardship there, and then talk about the medical office. And actually, that's what they did this time, and I actually found that that was a better argument to make. So basically, what they said was, the flag is so deep, and it is plagued by two issues. One, the need to put down so much roadway to access the part of the flag that you could actually build in, and also the yard regulations on that flag and how that would impact the layout. And so that all you would be able to get would be 2 homes, or with yard relief waivers, you could get 3 homes, but they would still be 3 substandard homes. And so what they did is they showed those 2 scenarios and showed that the 3 homes, because they would be so undersized, would result in low sales prices that wouldn't overcome the cost to access them in terms of the excavation, the pavement, I had a whole.
This retaining wall is
The
the other.
retaining
Yeah.
walls and the driveway, the fencing, the landscaping, they would not be able to overcome those costs by the sales price because those homes were so undersized. You basically, no one is gonna buy a home for it that's only 1,000 square feet.
That's with the
And that's
3.
also not
That's
built.
with the 3.
Right.
Even with the 2, you would buy a home that's 2,600 square feet. However, I'm not sure that the extra 300 square feet is going to alleviate the hardship, because the hardship still, on those lots, even with 2 homes, it's a minus 10% return. So I'm not sure that an extra 300 square feet is necessarily going to make the project viable on that lot. That being said, given that both of those scenarios are showing a loss, you have an option then, because there's a hardship on this lot. How do we resolve the hardship? Well, one way is to allow more floor area, but that may require more waivers in terms of yards. The other option is to allow additional parking on the medical office building site, and that would result in the ability to get more income per square foot for the medical building that would offset the hardship on the flag lot. And so that's how they kind of changed the argument for the financials. They did not change the argument for the statement of facts and findings, and I think that that's what they really need to do, because right now, the statement is still as it was. It's talking about the combined zoning lot kind of having the hardship of that original flag lot, and that's not so. It really should be talking about the flag lot having a hardship that can't be alleviated as of right, and therefore, in combination with the medical office building, it provides a solution that is a minimal variance because it requires the least amount of variance waivers in order to achieve a return. And if they switch the argument around like that, then they avoid the self-created hardship issue. And then they
I
have a
see.
uniqueness because that flag is the deepest, largest flag that you've got in that area.
And I want to add to that, I mean, there are some zoning sections that were not looked into, and once those are applied, though theoretically, numerically, on that lot, just the lot 80 as a standalone, just so, as a theoretical number crunching, one would be permitted to have 4 buildings there. But even an as-of-right building, just in terms of FAR, all of those,
FAR.
just simple FAR calculation, your lot area calculation, all of that. One could get 4 units, but what actually even as of right, the 3 that you're getting is not adequate because of the odd size of it, and the way the flag lot is, and that you have to maintain there's a driveway to get to it.
Wait, but the 3 houses aren't
It's
as
not
of
as
right.
of right.
They
That's
don't
the
comply
key.
with the side yard
You
regulations.
can't even get that.
I
It's
agree.
so underdeveloped.
Exactly, I agree.
Right,
So,
yeah.
they're calling it as of right. I'm going by what they're calling it as of right. I'm saying it's underdeveloped. It's still not.
Right, but they're not even calling it as of right.
No,
Because they're,
no.
in the papers are saying, you cannot, they had an architect write a letter saying, you cannot build this as
Yeah,
of
yeah.
right. So
Right.
they
So
never,
there-
I'm sorry, I'm just quoting it the way it was
So
presented.
just to go back, the floor area and the lot coverage, if you just looked at that by itself,
Right.
would allow a much larger structure, and
More structures.
more structures conceptually.
That's what I'm saying.
It's,
But-
let's say more floor area, that's really all, because
Right.
now you need to look at the
Right.
structures, right? So as soon as you start to look at 4 structures, there's no way, immediately before you even
Right.
start moving little rectangles around on the site,
You
you
can
realize
only-
you can't do 4.
Right.
So now you go to 3, now you look at all the yard requirements that apply in this district, because it's got layers and layers
Right.
of yard
Right.
requirements,
Right.
especially because it's a flag, because it's in lower
Right.
density, because one side lot line is actually the rear lot line of the other
Right.
guy. So
Because of all of
yes,
those,
right.
once you start setting things up, you have less room to play with to put a reasonable size unit that was
Right.
feasible. I'm actually I concur
Right.
with Commissioner Otley Brown. I'm just saying, if they were to go back and do the zoning calculation, it would just make that flagship site deemed even more difficult to build once you apply more of those.
No, but I'm not sure why they need to do that. The 3
Right.
houses.
They don't need to, I'm just kind of adding to that.
Oh,
right,
okay.
but literally, once you say you've got a
Right.
26,000 square foot lot in an R1 where you'd be able to develop about 13,000 square feet, and you can't, you can only get 5,200
Right.
square feet, that alone is making
It's
your
a-
case
exactly,
right there.
Right.
Well, but
You
except to
could build
say,
less than half of what you'd be
right.
able to.
Except to say that often we don't look at what the highest best use, we never look at the highest best use. We also don't look at maxing out your floor area. That's not the findings for a variance. What we look at is that what you can build on the lot is so limited that you can't realize a return.
Right.
And it's limited by
But
the shape of the
in
lot.
relationship to max FAR, because usually in an as-of-right, we tell them, max out the FAR in an
Right.
as-of-right. So it's only used, it's not that we're gonna guarantee you the max FAR, it's that that's our starting point, that's
Right.
our jump-off point.
Right,
Right.
okay, right.
There's just some couple of zoning corrections that need to be made. That is, there was a reference to zoning resolution section 25624B5 that was indicated. You need to clarify why that's not an issue with the 2 residential home scenario, which is the proposed scenario, and why it's only an issue with this, the so-called with the three home scenario. Also need to
But
correct.
is it 26B5?
25-624B5,
Oh,
and need to correct the reference to 23-543, which is the zoning lot with multiple rear lot line, what the text so far everywhere refers to as 25-543. That's not the zoning section. Also, please make sure that both the as-of-right and the proposed, I know the as-of-right, or as I'm calling it, the as-of-right, meaning the 3 homes scenario, the 3 home scenario versus the 2 home scenario, all of them meet the dwelling unit factor of R12, which is actually 2,850 square feet.
just to clarify that they do.
They do.
They do,
They-
right?
The 3 homes do not. Just make sure that the 2 homes do.
They don't? There's only 3 homes on that enormous lot,
But
and it
each
doesn't-
one has to meet the dwelling unit factor of 2850, 2,850 square feet. That means each has to be 2,850 square feet.
No,
Right.
the lot size.
No,
That's
no,
the
that's a
zoning
dwelling,
lot.
that's a dwelling unit factor. The R12 has a dwelling unit factor. I did not know this, I was just looking through it.
Even when it's just one single-family home?
You know, this is the part if they could clarify it, I mean, it just said, if you have a unit, this is the requirement, and
What's the section again? 20?
I don't have the section,
Oh.
but the dwelling unit factor is 2,850 square feet. So, I mean, I came across, it was not something I was looking for, they just need to make sure they would meet it.
So, but isn't that normally the factor where you say you can't have more, that's your density, right? You can't have more than X units if you take the allowable floor area and you divide it by but this is obviously
This even.
huge floor
Right.
area.
I mean, you would get 4 units
Oh,
using this, so that's not the issue. That's what I'm saying. Theoretically, you would get 4 units on this
Right.
flat site. But what they are showing in the plan, I don't think meets this 2,850.
but if they're giving less units, then the density is less. That's a density, but that's not a minimum building
But each-
size.
But again, it says in the lower density, each has to then meet the 2,850. So this is a clarification, they need to,
Oh,
thought it
I
was
think
if
I
there
know
were
what you.
multiple units.
No, I think I know what you, okay. What they're trying to do is, which we do see often on these GCL waivers, where they take one gigantic zoning lot and they divide it up into tax lots.
yeah.
And that way they get too many houses, really. And so to
Make sure that you
counter
know-
that, the zoning resolution actually says when you have multiple houses on a zoning lot, the same density rule applies as if it were
Single.
single,
yeah.
right?
Was this 2322 maximum number of dwelling units?
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
Okay.
So does it only kick in when you have the maximum number of dwelling units? Or does it kick in no matter how many dwelling units?
It kicks in.
No matter. I think it kicks in
Yeah,
no matter.
okay. We just need to review it again. I know that this is a way that they get around having way more houses on the zoning lot than is intended for the density regulation. So,
Want me to read it?
sure.
Sure.
In all districts, as indicated, the maximum number of dwelling units shall equal the maximum residential floor area permitted on the zoning lot, divided by the applicable factor in the following table. In R1 through R5 districts, any dwelling unit shall be occupied by only one family. Fractions equal to or greater than 3/4 resulting from this calculation shall be considered to be one dwelling unit. For the purposes of this section, where a floor area ratio is determined pursuant to 23-151, basic regulations for R6 through R9 districts, notwithstanding the height factor of the zoning lot, the maximum residential floor area ratio shall be 2.43 in an R6 district. This is an R12 though, right?
Right.
For zoning lots with buildings containing multiple uses or multiple buildings with different uses, special provisions to determine the number of dwelling units permitted is found in 2324. So the factor in an R12 is 2,850 square feet.
And then read a little further down.
That's
No,
the end of
let's
the.
But then if you go to the lower
Minimum.
density growth management, there, that's,
Yeah, I know that there's something about this,
right.
especially in lower density. I don't know exactly where it is. Okay,
I should have.
I don't know where it is. Okay, so it
We
needs
just
to
need
be.
to have it
yeah,
clarified.
Okay.
One.
Mhm.
Item number 14, 22614BZ, 14702 76th Road, Queens.
Stuck here. Okay, where are we? All right, I'm still looking for an owner's authorization form.
Huh?
Nowhere in the file. We talked about it at the last hearings. Revised plans were submitted. Designation of the floors changed so that the original first floor became a basement by dropping down 4 steps. And I found no changes to the layouts at the cellar, basement, which was the former first floor, which was the former second floor, other than the addition of a handicap lift from the side to the basement level and related changes to the toilet rooms. At the second floor, which is the former third floor, partitions were added to show office uses for 50 persons. The August plans show height to roof of 33'6" and height to top of bulkhead above roof 7'6". I actually think the 33'6" is an error because when I added up the floor-to-floor heights, I got 35 feet. So we are comparing a prior 35-foot high to now proposed 31-foot high building. But I don't understand why the bulkhead grew by 2 feet. It used to be 7'6" off the roof, and now it's 9'6". There's also the same errors on P1 concerning the total requested floor area, which I believe is 6927 square feet, and P1 chart shows it as 7,343 square feet. I didn't think the changes were that responsive to our concerns that the structure is too bulky for the lot without any setbacks from the sides, and it slams up against this, completely consistent row of houses that are all small with front yards and backyards. And when I compare the lesser variance option to the proposed, I don't see a big difference in occupancy, especially if the worship floor were at the level located 4 steps down and built deeper to the lot, and the multipurpose room were above it with a setback from the side. So in other words, that the first floor is built deeper, which you'd see with a community facility, and then there are setbacks on the upper floor. And especially if you split the multipurpose room with the worship space, I don't really understand the idea that for the times when you've got the most attendance, you go up to the second floor. Wouldn't you want the synagogue to be on the first floor? So I don't understand that relationship, other than that the real intent is to combine the 2 multipurpose rooms for events, which is not what this is. They told us this is not an event place. This is, specifically a house of worship, right? So on the busiest days, 175 persons attend events, according to the statement of facts. The lesser variance accommodates that number in the main worship floor plus part of a multipurpose floor. The same would be required of the proposed. The proposed also doesn't accommodate 175 people on one room. Since we were never provided with a chart showing every room and its occupancy each day, I can't figure out whether there is redundancy in the spaces. In addition, the second floor, which is the former third, now looks like, with office spaces, look like it could be trimmed to allow for setbacks from the side and the rear. And with all of the meals served, as they're describing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, basically, there must be refrigerated trash storage. They need to provide 4 elevations and show the proposed materials, and that styrofoam ephes is not an acceptable material. I saw that word floating on the drawings. Take it off. They need to show the materials for the fencing and the landscaping, and is the second floor roof setback and the roof planning to be occupied, because there's a door going to the second floor roof, and I can't really tell what's happening on the roof. And with respect to the rabbinical court, which is this ongoing, not sure what this thing, I'm still having trouble understanding how it's related to a synagogue. It's a completely separate function. And it's described as serving the entire community, which we discussed before, which is not this congregation only. And if that's the case, then it has a parking impact, which is different than the way you look at parking for the house of worship, where you just look at the largest worship floor. You can't ignore that, according to them, people are coming all day long to have meetings. They're all coming by car, because it's the kind of thing where it's really serious, and maybe you come with a bunch of people, and you're not all walking from home. It's the middle of the day. You're probably driving from work. So there's a traffic impact, and I still don't see the linkage between a house of worship and a really separate function that's kind of like an office function.
Right, I mean, I agree with you, and not only that, but now they're also saying on that floor is a rabbinical college. And that also is not specific to this synagogue and to this congregation. And so I personally am not convinced that that second floor is needed, because it is not needed for the programs that are specific to the synagogue. It has to do with programs that are for the community. So there is no driving need to have it located on this lot in this area.
On the second floor or now the second floor, formerly the third floor.
It was the third floor, it's now the second floor.
Right.
So now there's also this rabbinical college.
Right. Okay, anybody else?
No.
So to the extent, it's again one of those things, to the extent it drives the waivers, I just don't see there's no deference, right? Because that's what this is all about. So it's religious deference and related to a house of worship. That's what we're always told. It's religious deference related to a house of worship. That's what the court cases are about. And so to the extent any of these ancillary uses drive a variance, it's not acceptable. You could put them in the cellar, and it doesn't drive the variance. We don't know yet. Okay.
Item number 15, 10515 BZ, 2102, 2124 Avenue Z, Brooklyn.
Okay. It's gonna be hard. We received another letter from a neighbor expressing unspecified concerns about the proposed projects. The person just said they were concerned. Phase 2 testing report and revised EAS reflecting Scheme D were submitted on October 25th, so we haven't had a chance yet for DEP to review that. And also, we're still waiting for the waterfront. Okay, so that has to be revised, and then we just needed LPC's archaeological report. Do we have that? Do you know? We have it? Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Okay. As requested, the financials were revised to add to the study a Scheme E that contains the ground floor commercial and parking of Scheme D, plus residential above. The analysis shows that the cost of constructing such a building would render the project infeasible. A parking study was revised to incorporate data that is more specific to the proposed uses and to clarify the distances to the municipal lots. The 17th Street lot is 4.5 blocks away and has the most availability during peak times. Between 13 and 20 spaces are available there, except between 11 and noon when there are 7 spaces. In addition, it appears, based on parking counts that were taken, that there are between 52 and 74 on-street spaces available during peak times, according to the study. And, I'm okay with where they went and how they showed it, but of course, the financials speak.
Well, they did submit a new financial. However, it seems like there are still errors in the development costs, and some issues were not fully addressed concerning rentable space and income attributed to that space. And as a result, I really could not complete my review or my analysis.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we need the applicant to take a look at
Yes,
at consistency
yes.
and, yeah.
And
okay.
also making note of all the requests that we made in the previous hearing.
Okay. Okay. Any other?
No, I think the parking analysis, the way they did it with the muni lot and without the muni lot was helpful. And I thought the data was thorough.
Okay.
Item number 16, may I go on?
Uh-huh.
Item number 16, 17815 BZ, 9947 Davenport Court, Queens.
Okay, they requested an adjournment.
Item number 17, 2016 4179 BZ, 1462 62nd Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. At the previous hearing, I asked that the applicant establish that it is a Section 1210 definition school, and instead it supplied a copy of the New York State admin listing, which we've learned doesn't actually have anything to do with the 1210 criteria. It's simply some kind of a registration. A 1210 school is defined as one that provides full-time, quoting from the zoning resolution, full-time day instruction and a course of study that meets the requirements of Section 3204, 3205, and 3210 of the New York State Education Law. The applicant needs to provide information in the statement of findings on how the school satisfies those criteria, since this is a threshold matter for 7319. If they would just speak with the school administration and apply what they've learned from the programmatic needs, they could probably answer these questions, but it really does need to specifically address that threshold. With respect to the site search, we asked for more clarification on this, and were given a letter by the broker stating that the school was looking to purchase an existing building with 80,000 square feet of space. My understanding is that the school is a tenant here, so it doesn't, and there's no recorded lease, so I actually don't know what the situation is, or if they changed their criteria, if the search was for purchase and then changed to tenancy, shouldn't the site study include tenancy? So, and it's true, this is a very large site. That actually was helpful, having the map showing the size of the site in the Cashman area to show this is a really large building, unusually large. There's a stop work order on this site and a complaint about illegal scaffolding placed on neighbors' property which allowed a partial lift of the stop work just to correct the scaffolding. There are an enormous number of ECB penalties due that must be paid prior to our voting. There are 40 open violations, most of which appear to be related to the illegal conversion in 2013 to a school. So they can't say, oh, it's not ours, it's the landlord's story. The applicant submitted a September 15th proposal from an expediter that provides the expediter's approach to curing the violations. The expediter requested submission of checks to pay off certain violations and instructed corrective work be done to address others. One involves dismantling the elevator and another installation of HVAC. That work was underway apparently until the stop work order. What's the proposal to remove that now? And just to clarify, the school is closed during all this work, yes. The consultant needs to attend the hearing, that's the expediter, needs to attend the hearing to discuss how they're going to be addressing all of these violations. Apparently, there's a certain point at which you can request from the ECB a settlement agreement where I guess you pay the violations, but at the very least, we need to see settlement and some paying of the violations in a way that's, of the penalties in a way that's satisfactory to the ECB, because we cannot award a scofflaw. So plans were revised. It now appears that there is more floor area on the first floor devoted to the school than previously, where only the entry was used for the school. Now there's a much larger lobby, which I think is much better. Before, they were just like creeping up the back stairs to get to school. There's also teachers' offices and an auditorium lunchroom for 237 persons. Classrooms at the second floor are mostly on perimeter now, which is also an improvement. Before, you had like computer rooms, things that could be in the dark on the perimeters, as opposed to the previous version. Although I can't tell whether all will have windows since many are a lot line. Kindergarten through 2 is kept together on this floor. At the third floor, the 3rd to 8th graders are kept together, and at the 4th floor, 9th to 12th graders are kept together. So this is the one, I made a mistake about the 38th Street side. This is the one where they added another fire stair so that they could have better occupancy of the floors. And so that allowed them to keep the grades together before they had third graders with 11th graders, and it was just kind of very odd. The cover letter states that high school students will enter from 15th Avenue through the tight fire stair. I don't understand why you're putting the upper school kids through that same kind of tight little entrance where they have to climb all those flights of stairs that are not very, let's say, attractive. Why wouldn't you just have everyone enter the generous lobby and you do it in stages? And there's also 2 large stairways and a handicapped elevator, so that's another situation where you've got the disabled child entering in a different way from all of his or her peers. With respect to the lunchroom auditorium on the first floor, that's apparently for first and second graders and the middle school on the 3rd floor, which already has a lunchroom. I just find that so confusing, but especially that their path of travel, just because why would you take kids from one floor all the way down to the first floor if you've got a lunchroom already on your floor? But anyway, the path of travel is very circuitous to get to that lunchroom. Either you pass right in front of the administrative offices, or you go back down to the main lobby, and then you have to go through this pathway to get to the lunchroom. So you could have a connecting stair that takes you right down in front of the lunchroom, which would seem to be more efficient. They needed to provide a total occupancy at each floor. The charts that they provided include rooms that will be occupied simultaneously, so it really exaggerates the occupancy. That may be required by the buildings department, but for us to understand the program, we should understand how many kids on each floor and faculty. They need to provide a roof plan, and they refer to the roof plan in the statement of facts, but we actually never received it. That's P-105. Not the statement of facts, the cover letter. We were provided also with something called a memorandum of lease, which is not a lease. And last time I looked at what memorandums of lease look like, they don't look like this, which refers to a 1-year renewable lease for parking. We need a copy of the actual lease, and from which they could redact the cost if they want to. But the terms of the lease must be for the life of the use and clarify that parking is for not less than 12 buses. Also, the community board, sorry?
I have some comments on that.
Okay. The community board also was concerned about adequate parking for the employees. So as long as they're doing it, they should have adequate spaces for employees. The applicant submitted letters from various sprinkler and alarm installers. But because this is a school use, the fire department really needs to sign off on the fire alarm sprinkler installation and inspections, and having an affidavit or something like that isn't enough. It really need fire department to okay this. Also because it's been illegally occupied. So the applicant also submitted a window proposal, but I see nothing in the proposal that indicates that the 9.5 to 10.5 decibel level of sound attenuation required by DEP will be achieved with these windows, which are rated OITC 27. That doesn't tell us that tells us what the rating for the window is. That doesn't tell us what the step down is, because you look at an entire assembly. So unless we know what the assembly is, what outside is versus inside, we don't know what the step down is. Okay, so they're reviewing the noise, but they also need to look at the specified windows, because they're showing us that they picked some windows, some of which don't have a rating. So that's the other thing. Some of the operable ones, and I don't know where they go because the chart, the plans aren't legible that where they show all the windows. And also the EAS was resubmitted, right? It needs to be reviewed by DEP. So please.
So my main comment is with regards to the site that has been identified for leasing. The location is 1651 Coney Island Avenue. It's in an
For the parking.
For the parking. It's in an R7A district with a commercial overlay. There is a medical office building there, which has, and the medical office has its own parking requirement, and that parking requirement has to be fulfilled by that parking facility, and which is not a public parking facility. It's only an accessory. Based on the Google map, it looks like it's only an accessory parking facility and not a public parking. So we need to make sure any lease that is being signed here, it's not going to be at the cost of the parking requirement of the medical facility.
And how can, if it's an
And
accessory?
it's an accessory, I don't even know how it can provide parking for a non-accessory use. That's the other
Right,
question I
right.
had. So.
Is it an open parking lot?
No, there's a garage entrance.
How do you park buses in a garage?
That was another thing, the garage looked very low, so unless these are mini buses. So I'm not sure
Mhm.
whether this is a feasible location for a bus parking.
Okay.
Going back to the question you raised about the windows, I was just looking at the area map. I think you're concerned about the windows along.
The elevated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a railroad right of way, so I'm assuming there won't be any construction, and that may address the issue of the windows to the classroom. Is that the classroom you were concerned about?
What, no, the analysis showed that they needed a step down of 9.5.
No, you're talking about windows in the classroom, and you wanted to ensure that the windows will remain in the,
Oh, I wasn't sure whether they would have windows in all of the classrooms, because,
right, I'm assuming these classrooms won't get
Won't,
windows
yeah.
because they are along the side lot line, but these
Right.
would be able to, some of these I'm not sure.
but some of them are, I think, aren't those other ones on the side lot line also? So that's the thing, if it's side lot line, even if they're currently
Some of
windows,
these, yeah.
they might be blocked, because they're counting on the fact that the adjacent buildings are one story or something,
But this one is very small, so I-
and this
This
site is
one,
very small.
yeah, this one has a possibility of development if you merge with those
Yeah,
lots.
yeah.
But this one, I don't think so.
So this is kind of
But they just need to
designing,
clarify it.
yeah. But it's also designing where unfortunately classroom windows,
But this is much better. You do get more classrooms now
Yes.
in the perimeter than the previous one.
yeah, exactly. Okay. Any other comments? No?
Item number 18, 26, I'm sorry,
Mhm.
good. 2016-4262 BZ, 279 Church Street, Manhattan.
They request an adjournment to complete the fire alarm installation, and we're having a discussion with the fire department. Is this the one that's held up because of the fire department notice to proceed or something? Okay. Not sure about that one.
Item number 19, 2016-4333 BZ, 1350 Bedford Avenue, Brooklyn.
We received one new letter of support. We're waiting for a final version of the restrictive declaration and a letter from HPD indicating its commitment to enter into a regulatory agreement. Oh, it did?
A draft.
A draft, though, it's a draft.
Oh, okay. So I haven't seen the draft, okay. And I just want to make a note to our council that included in the approved set should be what was submitted with this submission was plans of the recreation spaces, a detail of the entry to the parking area, and the Pacific Street elevation. So that was additional information. So it was the plans of the recreation spaces, so we had a concern that by building on this lot, they were taking away open space from the existing building. And so now they're providing certain amount of recreation space on the inside of the building and some on the outside of the building, and that should be a condition. And also, they clarified how they're going to treat the facade at the Pacific Street elevation where the dumpsters, apparently, they're going to close up the archways there. Okay, and also, so there would be a number of conditions.
Sorry, one more. So in the approved set, should be plans for the recreation spaces, the
Det-
Pacific Street
Elevation.
elevation, facade details. and
Correct.
the
And
facade.
so they have two drawings. One's the Pacific Street elevation, and the other one's sort of a blow-up of that entry condition at Pacific Street. So all three piles of drawings should
And
be
Pacific Street
included.
entry conditions.
Yeah. Well, the reason I'm bringing this up is that they didn't resubmit the drawings. the entire set of drawings with
They
this
just
last
submitted 3
submitted.
new sheets.
Yeah, they submitted,
The clock is wrong.
it's more like 6 new sheets,
I know, I looked up and I'm going, what?
which always makes it confusing. So note always, please resubmit the entire package so we have it all together. Okay. Any comments on this? Okay.
Ready?
Yep.
Okay. New cases. Item number 1, now 19615 BZ, 250 Mercer Street, Brooklyn, Mercer Street, Manhattan.
Yeah. Okay. We have proof of notice of hearing to officials and to neighbors, but I actually didn't find proof of service of the initial application to officials, although we do have a community board
community
recommendation
board.
to approve. So I think it would be helpful if the folders were properly labeled hearing notice and notice of whatever it's called,
You want 2 separate
proof of
folders?
service. Yeah, and the problem is the people who are putting the stuff in the folders don't know the difference. So you open the one that says proof of service, and that's where the notice of hearing is. So we need to do a little
Okay.
training.
Separate. All right.
So then you think you have everything, but you don't, because the folder doesn't reveal
All right, so I'll
the
check on this for
contents.
you.
We do have DOI sign-off and LPC permit for minor work at the exterior. This is a legalization. A statement of facts indicates that in 2015, a fire alarm system for this use was not approved for installation by DOB because no C of O for a PCE use had been obtained. I'm a little surprised by that statement in a revised statement of facts because that's not been our working operation for at least 2 years. DOB will issue a permit for such installation, and recently we've been issuing a letter to DOB to give them confidence that that's what they should be doing. Photos of sprinklers installed were provided, but no approved or signed off DOB applications were submitted or notation on the drawings that there is a sprinkler were shown. We have copies of the massage therapist licenses,
Right.
and the statement of facts indicates there are 3,493 square feet, but the plans show 3,593 square feet. I always defer to the plans. I assume the architect is right, but that should be verified.
Okay.
Anybody else? Okay. And, this opened in October of 2015, which was 2 months after the application was filed. So this isn't the case of waiting so long that it opened immediately. Okay.
Item number 2, 2016-4153 BZ, 4701 19th Avenue, Brooklyn. It's a school.
Okay. We have proof of service to officials and notice of hearing to officials and neighbors, and a letter of support from Councilmember Greenfield, and a community board recommendation to approve. We also have 2 letters of objection from neighbors concerned about parking and another about blocking rear yards. We also have 8 letters of support from a neighbor and from IS 192 about Project Hearts program at IS 192, and from a girls' school in the area, and from the Museum of Jewish Heritage, all in support. This is an application for variances under 72-21, relying on the Cornell Doctrine educational deference for a Holocaust research center. However, if we look at this corner lot, as a standalone, as we have been asked to, it's only 22 feet wide and 105 feet deep. And minimum lot area for 1 to 2 families is 3,800 square feet and 40 foot wide. And for other uses, 1,700 square feet and 18 feet wide. So the site can't be developed as of right with a single or a 2-family home at all. Front yard regulations for both residential and community facility uses are 10 feet. Side yard regulations are 20 feet and 8 feet for residential, although 0 lot line is permitted on one side. And I won't get into the other side yard regulations, but there are a lot of regulations that restrict how big the building can be. So an as-of-right plan, needs to be provided showing regulations applicable to residential uses on the lot, just to show us how restricted the lot is. Maybe that's an argument for a unique physical condition. However, on the other hand, the statement of fact states that this site is unrelated to the adjacent property at lot 165. But the zoning lot description that's recorded in 2014, so it's the zoning lot description and ownership statement recorded in 2014, shows that the two lots are a single zoning lot. Uh-oh. And Acris shows that they are held in common ownership by Congregation Zikron Yehuda and Kana, and not by Mossad Harim Levin, as is stated in the statement of facts. The owner's authorization letter, however, is correct. It's from the Congregation Zikron Yehuda. The latter is apparently being proposed as the tenant, so that Mossad Harim Levin is being proposed as the tenant. Neither Lot 165 nor the subject lot have a C of O to allow synagogue use, and an application was filed to convert the building on Lot 165 to a three-family residential. So in short, I'm not convinced that the site can't take full advantage of its greater width and combine the two uses without needing such large waivers. And it's not really clear that the synagogue is operational because the site is a mess. It's just a wreck. And so if it's operational and they maintain it as a wreck, this does not bode well for their maintenance of the site in future situation. So I prefer to think that it's not being used at all. So it's inexcusable to have the site be treated this way. So my initial problem is that I don't see that you can make a case for not having the entire zoning lot used for this use, in which case waivers, if any are needed at all, would be different. I'm not sure that any would be needed at all, but let's say a front yard waiver for argument's sake, right? So, and then just to go on to some of the activities that are proposed, I'm not understanding how Project Witness would accomplish its level of outreach without its staff continuing to travel to the schools. So they're saying that everybody would come to them, but according to the way they describe their program, they need to have people go out to the schools and make their presentations because schools are too far away to drive all that distance just for, a 2-hour event or something like that, and it would be obviously a more efficient program if there is outreach. And they're saying, and they're relying on this new seminary program, and that's only one program. So I don't see how you create a whole building all about one program for new seminary. With respect to the new seminary, which I'd like to understand which degree granting program of their curricula requires this Holocaust study for credit, and is New Seminary in an accredited university or college? Because that's how we actually have looked at these extensions of educational deference, where, for example, it's connected with a degree granting program from an accredited university. So I'd like them to explain further about what New Seminary is and how it grants bachelor's degrees from Adelphi and other universities in only 1 year, as is shown on their website. Is Project Witness somehow related to New Seminary? Is it related to Bias Yaakov, which is referred to in New Seminary as the source of students? Will Project Witness classes only be open to women, since New Seminary is a women's institution of some type? And why can't classes be held at New Seminary, as opposed to why do they need classrooms in this location? With respect to New Seminary, because it was actually a source of curiosity for me, the address I found in Brooklyn for the New Seminary at 1492 East 12th Street, when I actually looked at the location, that's actually a residential condominium with medical offices on the first floor, according to its certificate of occupancy and according to the building that's located at that location. and that created a huge curiosity for me, so I went to look at New Seminary's other 2 locations using Google Earth, because I'm not going to drive to New Jersey and Muncie, New York. So their Lakewood, New Jersey location at 139 Ocean Avenue is an office building with no indication of a seminary on its panel board. And the location at 54 Mariner Way in Muncie, New York is a private home. So, what is New Seminary? Does it exist? The website also hasn't been updated since last spring. So I'm not sure we can rely on New Seminary's degree granting program for support for this application. The schedule provided for this subject site doesn't justify the need for classroom spaces, since they're not tied to specific programs at the school, at other schools. So I think the applicant was provided with a copy of the settlement houses application to show how a facility that's not a religious institution in that case, and wasn't specifically an educational institution, qualified for educational deference because of the very dependent link that the local public schools had on settlement houses for fulfilling a lot of their requirements for gym, computer classes, all kinds of things that couldn't be accommodated at the public schools. Nothing provided in the application justifies the need for the number and sizes of offices or areas of archival, library, or lecture spaces. And I'm not saying that you don't need archival and lecture space, but they didn't justify the reasoning for it, how they came to the conclusion about size and so on. And by the way, if they're valuable archives need to be kept in a very particular way. If you go to any of the libraries that have sort of valuable manuscripts and documents like that, they're kept in special situations, right? And never in cellars, right? And so, my reaction a lot to this is, if this is actually a valuable library, it should be housed at a library and not in a building that's really not equipped to handle archival resources, because for all sorts of really good library technology reasons. So at the moment, I'm having trouble either making a uniqueness finding, since the zoning lot is 44 feet wide, and the educational connection to New Seminary is, I was going to use the word tenuous, but it's less than tenuous. It's like a filament. The Louis Armstrong case that was cited in the statement of facts as the model for this one appears to be inopposite, in that Armstrong House Museum and Visitor Center is actually a part of Queens College's music department, and Queens College owns the site. So, and when you go on to the Queens College website, you click on the Armstrong Museum site, and then you can see what kind of classes you can take and how they have an affiliation with other music programs at other universities. So, the August 6, 2015 letter from PS 259 with respect to Project Heart indicates they would be implementing the program in 2015. So could the applicant provide an update from PS 259 and from Project Witness to describe how the program operated that year and whether it has continued it into this semester? They should provide letters from other schools who would participate in such a program. They should provide a copy of Witness to History textbook and more information on publications and films produced by the institution. They gave us one sort of teaching tool that it looks like about how to teach about the Holocaust. But, it sounds like they're textbook producers, and so we should actually see something more substantial than that little teaching tool. With respect to neighborhood character, and this is my main reason for questioning this so much, is the building actually towers over its neighbors. And the first floor is raised 5 feet above grade. So why isn't there a cellar instead of a basement? they need to provide the rear elevation and the building finished materials. And so, you can have lectures in the cellar. You may not keep archival materials in the cellar, but also, why does the lesser variance have only 1.75 FAR if allowable is 2? And why is the layout at the first floor of the lesser variance, why does that have a kitchenette and a workshop, whereas there's no such program in the proposed? And then finally, with respect to the traffic study, the program given to the traffic consultant is different from what's shown on the statement of facts. The traffic study states that users would be lower, middle, and high school students arriving by bus. This is totally inconsistent internally, so I actually no longer know what this project program is. Others?
So I also had the question about the zoning lot, and so I won't dwell much into it. I want to understand that and why those two lots cannot be used as one site for integrating the uses.
Well, and in addition to which, when we look at a variance, we look
Right.
at a zoning lot.
Right.
So there we go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Moving on to the programming of it, according to the statement, the lecture hall will be utilized only on Thursday evening, 8 to 10 p.m. And an as-needed basis for communal and larger school events. Now, the capacity of the space matches that of the classrooms on the third floor. So my question is, why can't the classrooms serve as the lecture halls? Because the classrooms end pretty much before 8 p.m. So then those classrooms can serve as lecture halls, and then there is no overlap of time, and you can convert the lecture hall into some classroom and bring the height down. That talks to the, also would address the neighborhood character issue and eliminate one of the levels. And this will, and another, so I'm going to jump to the neighborhood character, and that has to do with the way the lesser variance and the proposed has been laid out. In the lesser variance, we're seeing a cellar and a basement, first floor, second floor. Whereas in the proposed, there is no cellar, it's just the existing basement, and it seems in the proposed, some of the existing building is going to be retained, which to me doesn't seem reasonable in this case. And then 2 additional floors. The lesser variance, if you're showing in the lesser variance a cellar and a basement, a cellar well below grade and a basement partially below grade, that's what we should be seeing also in the proposed. And the cellar can be a full lot coverage cellar that would accommodate your lecture hall, your storage spaces, and then the basement can be your library, an archive, or office space, whichever. You can bring the height down by 1 floor easily by doing that, just keeping it on that portion of the zoning lot. So I definitely think they have some ways to go, and they need to merge the lesser and the proposed. Similarly, just looking at the proposed, some of the ways the plan has been laid out as I'm looking at the section, the lobby is kind of, below the lobby is the utility room, and the utility room is barely 3 feet, if at all. That's not a functional utility room, especially if the basement is the existing basement level.
Isn't that just that section is a very strangely located
It's a very,
section?
right, I mean,
But it's just for the lobby that's entering the building?
It is, but below it, if you look at this basement, there is, the utility room is right underneath this section. So it's
In the
not,
plan,
in
it's
the
coming,
plan.
yeah.
So it's not at all functional. So either you are considering lowering, digging below grade in the proposed, which has not been reflected in the plans in the section, similar to the lesser. So we definitely need to see and understand a scenario where the cellar is below the grade level as shown in the lesser variance.
Mm-hmm.
I think those were my main. I mean, if you want to pick up, I have some other ones,
Oh,
I'll fill
okay.
in.
Well, I agree, like, with both of you, that I don't believe that they've satisfied the uniqueness finding yet. It's still up in the air as to whether or not this is an educational institution and can then take advantage of the programmatic needs argument. And then if they prove that they can, the programmatic needs argument to me is too general. There aren't any specifics in the paperwork in terms of, how many people per class, how many times? And so that would support the need for classrooms of a certain size. And then and if they don't qualify as an educational institution, then I don't know how they meet the uniqueness finding based on narrow lot when they're now a 44-foot wide zoning lot. So I think that's a threshold issue, the A finding, that needs to be met before we could go any further with our analysis. That's where I am.
Yeah.
And also just adding to that, the lesser variance, as you mentioned, the layout is different. It seems it has other programs, so we need to also understand is there a programmatic difference between the lesser variance and the proposed?
Right. Well, and also the traffic study is
Traffic study
indicating
is-
this completely different
Right.
program,
So obviously to be
so,
consolidated.
right. Okay. Mr. Schickel? Any
No, I have no
questions?
comment on that.
I think one question, though, they seem unclear in how they're even pursuing this, is they do show at one point the retention of the cellar of this little bitty wooden,
You mean basement?
I mean, the cellar floor, right? They're showing retention, I don't know if it's a basement, okay,
It's
so
actually
it's a
a
basement,
basement,
okay. They're showing retention of that. The idea that you would maintain the little bitty house and its little bitty basement slab seems ridiculous.
And in the lesser variance, it's not even contemplating that, it's
Right.
like a new construction.
Right, so we'll hear from them tomorrow whether that's something they're actually thinking of. But these are little bitty house, this is a little bitty house. The proposed building is much larger than it is in all directions. For a completely different use, it's gonna be handling loads of people, right? So it's not like a family of 5, it's 50 people or 75 people or whatever it is. So it doesn't seem like any of the existing building should be contemplated to be reused, or that it would be a cost savings to reuse it, because we've heard that in other cases where they say, oh, we want to keep the same basement because it'll save us money. This doesn't seem like it'll save them money to actually keep it at that level.
And also, I don't know if the lesser variance is realistic, it only shows one set of staircase.
Right, but not the lesser variance, but it's inconsistent drawings.
Right.
So the proposed doesn't seem to be showing a
Showing.
retention of the basement,
Right.
whereas the lesser variance shows retention of the basement. So personally, I think they should just cut that out of the story,
Mhm.
but they haven't addressed in the statement of facts, in nowhere have they discussed the reason for showing the basement being retained.
Only thing in the plan.
Any other comment? Okay. And then, Jen, to go back to the settlement house, in terms of the timing and the population and so on, settlement house was able to obtain from the different schools all kinds of representations of how they plan to work with this new facility, and had worked with the facility, the existing facility. So they could talk about, we used to do this until the fire department told us that we couldn't come here, right? Which is why Settlement House had to relocate, because they couldn't handle the occupancy loads. Okay.
Also, I'm not sure why the as-of-right plan was shown, and it's not even accurate, because it's, so, I'm not sure what it was trying to address.
It wasn't accurate because,
I think you can build to the full rear lot line, because you're allowed to have a permitted obstruction up to the height of 1 story or
Okay.
22 feet. Though, I mean, so graphically, a 4-foot-long structure,
not sure, because they keep changing the rear yard obstruction rules. And in R5, I don't remember whether it has to be a house of worship, right? So since
Oh,
this
yes,
would
yes.
not, this would just be a not-for-profit institution.
Okay.
So I
You're
don't
right.
know whether you could
yes,
obstruct.
you're right.
Okay.
Item number 3, 2016-4230BZ, 1912 and 1920 Amethyst Street?
Amethyst.
Amethyst,
Yeah.
Bronx.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and proof of notice of hearing to neighbors and officials. Community Board said they had no objection to the project. We have 2 letters of objection from neighbors, one of which is concerned about parking and poor site maintenance. The statement of facts states that the prayer spaces are 5,960 square feet for 596 persons occupancy, and 3,564 square feet for 356 persons, which is 10 square feet per person. But the statement of facts also states, as does the as of right, that the minimum floor space for prayer is 7 square feet per person. So there's a maximum allowable rated occupancy according to the building code for this use. That's what should be used. On another application, there was some sort of debate back and forth. I think they ended up at 7, but I'm not sure. I know they were arguing for 5, but buildings department didn't allow 5. So anyway, it should be calculated based on whatever it is buildings department requires. And it's sort of by treating the proposed and the as of right differently in terms of the math, that we're not comparing apples to apples. On the proposed, you're using 10 square feet, and on the as of right, it's 7 square feet, so we can't tell what the loss in population is and whether, say, a lesser variance of some type would still accommodate the congregation. There's this open hall in the cellar and also in the recreation and in the cellar, and also there's a recreation area on the 3rd floor. I don't understand the need for both of those spaces. Also, what's the need for classrooms on the 2nd floor if there are classrooms in the cellar already that are only used for weekend school? So that means they sit empty. So there's a lot of, it appears, downtime on these spaces. With respect to classroom use, the statement of facts that states that there is a weekday after-school religious program, but the programmatic needs report states that religious training is only during the weekend school. So there's a disconnect there in the telling of this story. Also, both reports state that there is a STEM tutoring during the weekdays after school. Where does that occur? They're not explaining that. Maybe that's what happens downstairs in the cellar. But I don't know what happens on the 2nd floor. With respect to the lesser variance parking, why can't some of the required parking be located in the cellar of the building, for example? With respect to the as of right, we have seen recently mosques with prayer spaces that are stacked on multiple floors, in one case on 3 floors, that meet the needs of the congregation. So I'd like to know why that can't be done here, since the parking requirements look only to the size of the largest worship space. So you can, on that other one, they kept the size of each floor small enough so that they actually didn't trigger a parking requirement. And then they had 3 floors of that. So also, why isn't the cellar and the as of right the same size as it is in the proposed? And with respect to the parking study, it's based on the current congregation attendance of 500 persons, not the projected 800 persons. So it looks like demand over existing conditions will in fact increase. They're stating that people are already driving, to the extent they drive, to the other location, which is around the corner. So, and this is just going to be the same people, but in fact, they're saying it's an increase in the congregants by 300.
I just had a question about the existing space that's a few blocks away that they say has 500 people are actually attending. And are they all attending this one space, or are they spread out into different mosques? Because I did a site visit on Friday at around 12:30, 1 o'clock in that time period, and I did notice that, like they said, there is a spill out onto the street. But if the building only accommodates about 110 worshipers, the spill out should have been like 400 people, and maybe I saw about 60 people. So
when did you go?
I went between 12:30 and 1, and they
On
were
Friday.
on Friday, and they were in prayer when I drove over because they were standing in the street. And So I'm not sure that all of those people actually attend that one site, and if so, then if not, rather, then the parking, even based on what's going on existing, is not giving us the total story. If it's not 500 people, it's not even coming close to giving us that story in terms of where people are parking. If only 160 people are accessing that site.
Okay, that's fair. Also, I also wanted to understand, with respect to the parking, also, wouldn't the majority of midday prayer attendees work in the area rather than live in the area? Are people really driving from wherever they're working to come for the midday prayer? That's, I don't really understand that. They claim that there is a 3-person, because it's one thing, we always do these studies where we look at who lives in the area. Those people are going to walk to the house of worship, right? But that makes sense when worship is after work and weekends, right? But in this situation, it's in the middle of the day, so in the middle of a workday. So I'm just not sure what's working.
Right, and I
there.
think we once had a case that stated that during that daily prayer period, you worship basically where you are. So a congregant may be working in Brooklyn, and they're going
Right.
to drop into a mosque there, and also people will drop into this mosque probably who don't necessarily consider themselves part of the congregation.
Right.
And they don't address that at
But-
all.
But that would also go to more walkers as opposed to more drivers, right? So if the people that are spilling out onto the street are coming at midday from work, they're likely going to the place closest to where they work, right? So a study of where people are coming from, and are they walking from wherever their place of employment is, not getting in their cars and driving 2 miles away or whatever to go to it.
Well, I have to say, though, what I did observe when I was driving there was there were people double parking
Oh.
and then going across the street at a very steady clip to try and make it to the prayer as well. So it might be a situation where, if you are, maybe you're a cab driver or a livery driver, and it's that time,
Wherever you are.
wherever you are,
Yeah.
you park
Yeah,
your
yeah.
car and you get over there for prayer. I
Right.
don't know, I'm not familiar with the faith, but they should speak to that.
Right, okay. Okay, and then they also said that there were 3-person carpools. So, but it wasn't based on any kind of a study that was submitted. Sometimes we get a survey, a poll taken of congregants to support suppositions, because, again, I don't really understand the idea of a 3-person carpool unless everyone works at the same place,
And
or.
especially on weekdays when you have schools and other things.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, and I mean,
funny.
right, so they need to clarify the assumptions for the proposed project about everything, really, the total number of families, because is it 500 or 800 that they're including? The total congregants, which is different really than the total number of families, the total congregants who attend the busier prayer times. Also, just getting to the architecture, what's the finished exterior building material? And we also don't have any data on the impact on neighborhood character with respect to height and setback. They didn't discuss it, it's a finding that needs to be discussed. Anybody else? Any comments? No other comments?
With regards to the parking utilization, it says that 29% of the congregants come by auto, and which comes to 138, and by carpooling, the number comes to something like 46. I think the highest number, if you use the highest rated capacity space, which is 475, they have they have been correctly stated as 475. It's actually 596. If you use that number, then the car parking requirement is 57 and not 46. So that's a correction that needs to be done, and that would have to be corrected throughout the traffic analysis. I wasn't quite sure of the programmatic, as you pointed out, the second floor and the utilization. And the statement of fact talks something different than the program chart that's been provided, so it was not clear, so there needs to be a better clarification on that. So I think it would be helpful if they can provide a chart that shows by day and hours of program, each one of the space, specifically the classroom spaces below grade and the open space, and how that is being co-shared during weekdays and weeknights and weekends, and how that particular programming is happening.
But it should be everywhere, just
Everywhere.
all the
Right.
spaces.
I agree, yes. Couple of mistakes with regards to the heights. In the as of right plan 8 and as of right plan 10, 12, and 13, the floor to ceiling heights are, they're not represented consistently, and same thing with the proposed plan. In somewhere it's 10 foot, somewhere it's 10 foot. So it's, those need to be consolidated, and that would also affect the building massing height that's been proposed.
So I had questions about the as of right. The as of right has a smaller footprint so that they could provide the parking, but their cellar is not entirely below grade, and so they can't take advantage of having the full lot used towards the cellar. Is there a reason why they can't sink that cellar totally below grade, have that be the footprint of the entire lot, so they could put all the classrooms and everything that they needed down there, and then go from there and talk about whether or not there are deficiencies? That was one of my questions. And then my other question had to do with the proposed. The rooftop area in the proposed could actually be, and actually in the as of right as well, can be accessed by the members. So my question is, what is actually going to go on there, and what are the hours of usage, and will there be amplified noise, or will there be lighting?
Good, okay. Thank you.
Good. Item number 4, 2017-23 BZ, 32 Lexington Avenue, Brooklyn.
We do have proof of service of initial application to officials, but I actually didn't find proof of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors in the file, in spite of the fact that we have many letters of opposition. Community Board recommends denial. Councilmember Kumbo recommends disapproval, citing height and neighborhood context, safety, and traffic concerns. And we have, as of my review on Friday, approximately 80 individual letters of opposition, but I understand many more were submitted this morning. And a petition in opposition signed by 238 persons, all in combination citing height, loss of light and air, traffic congestion, safety, particularly with respect to Classen Avenue, construction impacts, and noise concerns. There's also opposition represented by counsel for 38 Lexington Avenue neighbor. The fire department issued a letter of no objection with respect to the project. I'd like to understand the ownership situation with this project. It appears that all beneficial interests in the property are owned by a for-profit corporation known as Quincy Street Owners LLC, and I don't see any record of leases to either Manatus Development Group or to the Unity Preparatory Charter School. So how do you get educational deference when, it's arguably a tenancy, but that's a whole other subject when we're talking about a variance as opposed to a 7319, which is really just a use waiver, right? This zoning lot is subject to HPD review related to the inclusionary housing development compensation granted as a result of the construction in 2008 of 48 units of affordable housing on the site. So HPD must sign off on changes to the approved plans. There is also a 2009 low-income housing tax credit regulatory agreement with DHCR that describes the 8-story, 48-unit rental building with accessory parking for 17 cars. The approved plans show 17 spaces in a 6-story building. The C of O shows a 6-story, 48-unit building with 19 parking spaces. We also need DHCR sign off on the proposed changes to the approved project. With respect to the waivers requested, this one reminds me very much of another school project we have before us, where certain of the waivers being sought are to compensate for the existing residential development on the zoning lot. Here, the requested waivers are related to the existing legal, non-complying residential building. The proposal here is to exceed the 2006 R6 then allowable and now non-conforming floor area, since the residential building was built almost to its limit at the time. That requested waiver has nothing to do with the school's programmatic requirements, since it's necessary to preserve the residential building. So it's very similar to the other one, where the developer knew at the time of developing the residential building that he was stripping the vacant lot of development capability, right? In the other case, not stripping, but reducing significantly development capability. So you can't now ask for floor area where you took the floor area away by intentionally putting it all on one building. So I have a lot of trouble with that.
Also fails on programmatic needs also for the school to have parking that has nothing to do with the school. It has to
Right.
do with the building behind it, the residential building.
Exactly. So the parking is driving a lot of the waivers. Okay, so we have only, in terms of trying to understand what happened in 2006, we're missing one page of the 2006 approved zoning calculations, so we need the rest. And it isn't clear whether the parking was required at that site. The statement of facts says it wasn't, but it also states, without providing support, that the financing and regulatory agreements required parking. I'm not convinced that that's so. I didn't find such commitments relative to the parking in the agreements I reviewed that were available on Acris. They just stated the facts. It's a building of X size with X units that has this many parking spaces. It doesn't indicate whether that was a requirement. But, this is really difficult because now we're talking about the other kinds of issues where I just find it's been stripped of its floor area. And how can you reward ultimately the developer, who seems like they're the owner of the property and not the school? And in any event, that would be doubly rewarding the developer if the developer sold an undevelopable lot. That's just a sad story for the school, right? And it says in the statement of facts, in relation to that, very confusingly, that in 2006, the developer had intended to construct a school building on the vacant portion of the site, but was thwarted in 2007 by the rezoning to an R6B. That's not a true statement, because the 38,100 square feet of residential building consumed nearly all of the 38,500 square feet that was allowed under the 2.2 FAR zoning prior to. So that's just an outright incorrect statement, however you want to describe it. And further, with respect to the height of the building, as you said, it's in part due to the 2-story gym at the top floor. With some schools, we ask, why not put the gym in the cellar?
Exactly.
And usually the response is, oh, it's too expensive, or
High water table and things like that.
Exactly.
Sure, it's the parking.
But here we've got a 3-tier, 17-space parking garage that's 20 feet below grade, accessed by expensive elevator with very expensive, because we see the pushback on those semi-automatic parking systems. So this developer is willing to go through enormous expense to preserve the parking. And what's the result in terms of this project? Pushing the building very tall and panicking everybody in the neighborhood. So it's the unrequired parking and the gym height driving the waivers, basically. And the fact that there's no floor area. And I can't get past the fact that there's no floor area. So with respect to the A finding, I don't see that the applicant is actually a not-for-profit school, but a for-profit developer, so it's not entitled to deference under the Cornell doctrine. And jumping to the D finding, it appears the hardship complained of is created by the developer of the residential project, and even under the Cornell doctrine, the D finding applies. So even if we had to give deference, there's nothing in the case law that says you don't look to self-created hardship. In considering this site with their broker, it's difficult to imagine how the Unity School was persuaded that this was the site to pursue if 100% of its viability as a development site for any use at all depends on a variance. I found no sign of the developer's efforts to merge the zoning lot with others in an effort to restore floor area to the zoning lot. And that, it seems to me, is the only way for the BSA to consider at all moving forward with this application, that they find floor area. And I was just looking around, there are low buildings adjacent, so you could merge and buy some floor area if the developer is so concerned about continuing, like doubling the profitability of the site. And that's the way to do it, but then we still have deference issues. As to the substance of the application, if there's any way to get there, applicant didn't respond to neighbors' concerns about dangers to children in this heavily trafficked area, drop off and pick up by parents, management of children on the street. The statement of fact states that the current school is 6th to 9th grade, and expectation is to grow to 12th grade. Plans show only 9th to 12th grade classrooms. So what happened to the 6th to 8th graders?
They're at a
They're
different
the other
site.
different.
They're going to leave them at the other site.
Yes.
Because they talk about that they want to consolidate the school and so on. I guess not. So,
The 9th grade right now is expanding, and they only have one
Right.
room, and they want to consolidate all the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th in one. I think
But-
that's
Right,
how I
yeah.
understood it.
That's what I.
but then, but the thing is, you won't have a 10th grade until the 9th grade graduates, and et cetera, right? So,
They already
Yeah.
have
Right,
students
so
in the 9th
within
grade.
4 years, they'll
Within 4
be-
years, so by the time the construction is, so they have the lease till 2018, that will take care of the 9th, 10th, and 11th. By the time the construction is done, then they would have had the full range of the 9 to 12, that's how I understood it.
okay. They should also show the proposed room capacity in each room and indicate whether the rooms are simultaneously occupied. With respect to relative heights, that's how they're making an argument for this tall building. We don't look at a half-mile radius since it isn't indicative of immediate neighborhood character. We look at 400 to 1,000-foot radius, and also to the character of the social block and tax block on which the project is located. So the Watershed map shows no properties as tall as the proposed within 1,000 feet. And I'd like to know about noise studies. Were noise studies conducted with respect to the use of the rear yard for children's play? Is the roof proposed to be used for play? We need a clearer site plan showing proposed treatment of the open area also. And just, this is small compared to the bigger problems, but I just throw out the comments. They need to provide refrigerated trash storage for the cafeteria. With respect to the EAS, it states in the traffic analysis that only 209 students will arrive during the 7 to 8 a.m. peak hours. However, there will be over 400 students arriving. So impact on traffic is actually 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. I don't think it's right to just look at that
15
1
minute
hour.
intervals.
Yeah, exactly, because you've got kids, and I don't know how you can say that there won't be times when kids are mixing at different hours of arrival and so on. Especially because they're not arriving by bus. The other schools that we see where the kids are regimentally bused, right? And they get picked up all over the neighborhood, and then they get dropped off in 15-minute intervals, and the next bus doesn't come until radioed. That's a totally different way of controlling pedestrian traffic than here, where these are high school students who will arrive on their own, however they arrive. And then the EAS and the statement of facts don't match at all with respect to the program. The EAS states that there will be 60 staff members, while the statement of fact states there will be 18. The 60 is actually probably more believable. And we don't have any comments on the September 11th EAS from DEP, as far as I know. So we're waiting for that. Okay, others?
I had similar question on the programmatic need. I would like more clarification, specifically like the gym use, the mezzanine use, the resource room. I don't think the documents adequately clarified that. I mean, many cases, many a times we have seen schools, especially when they're co-locating with other schools, they could share the gym with other schools in the area. I think those have not been explored and those need to be clarified. I was looking at the plan and I mean, since it's the parking that's barring aside the fact that there is no floor area on the table, if, let's say, miraculously floor area became available through some zoning lot merger or whatever it is, it's the parking lot that's causing the height. I mean, the height can be brought down and brought below grade if the parking lot is. And I would like to know who is paying for the cost of building that parking lot below grade. If the school is doing that, I mean, then that's not an argument. Then you can build
The school's a sublessee,
Yeah.
so
The
they're not paying for
developer-
anything.
No.
You've got the owner and the developer.
But then who, no, okay, then the question is, it's being subsidized from.
More than subsidized. So
Th-
this is,
Isn't there a rent, for every construction, doesn't DOE pay a certain amount of money?
no,
towards-
oh, this is a charge, because it's a charter school. Not
Right.
necessarily, but they may be getting some finance, some kind of
Right.
advantages from DOE. That's a good point. Because you look at this where the developer has stripped all development capability from this parking lot, right? As far as the developer was concerned a few years ago, it's a forever parking lot with a few bushes, right? And then up comes this idea, if we put something on the site that could obtain a variance, then it's like going back to the well, right? And if, as you suggest, DOE gives some sort of financial something or other, then it's worth spending all that money on building this building. The school pays rent, and I don't actually understand the sublessee, so there's the net lessee, and then there's the school of the sublessee. So the net lessee is somehow taking care of more things somehow than the school. But in the end, the developer is making a nice hefty rent off of a site that was a parking lot, that was an undevelopable shrub,
Right, and,
right?
and the state, I guess, is who's paying the rent, because they allow a certain amount of money for charter schools per
Right.
student. So that's where the money is flowing from.
Okay.
I think in this case, if the developer is building it, they should explore the possibility of putting that cellar parking in the rear yard, in the shared rear yard of the residential and the community school.
But it'll still drive the waivers.
But it's, yes, I mean, again, assuming the floor area can be found somewhere.
Right.
Then you can build the building, bring the building height down, you can put a lot of that facility below grade where right now the parking is. And
Right.
move that parking space, instead of under the school footprint, move it under the rear yard. And then have that rest of that footprint that is under the school for the school use and then try to bring the height down again.
Yeah.
Footnote,
Right, but
assuming there is floor area.
ultimately, the residents suffer, because
Yeah,
you're creating
residents
a canyon
Right.
in between these two tall buildings.
No, I
The
think
school
she's
is-
saying
no,
at
below
grade
grade.
part.
No, I know, but it's
Or-
still, it's a
No, I'm saying
canyon
below
of,
grade.
Oh, below grade.
Below grade.
Mission-
It's
Oh,
you
it's
just-
below
You
grade.
just shift that cellar space that you have that staggered thing.
oh,
No.
into
Move
the
it
back. Oh, I
below
thought you
grade.
meant at grade.
No, below grade, under the cellar, you can do it. I looked at the measurements, you can do that.
But then you
And then-
also have
We have 5
something
minutes.
driving, we have 5 minutes?
Yeah, we have this room until 12:30.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Huh. But just the last point, you also have access from the street to the parking also affecting the design of the school building. So arguably, you wouldn't be able to fit the gym in anymore because the gym you
Still
saw
have the
is,
driveway.
is actually wider than the building. It's overhanging into the rear yard. So no matter how you look at it, keeping the parking is driving the waivers, so they need to get rid of the parking, and that's kind of not our problem. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Okay, this concludes the public review session for November 13th, 2017.
Okay.